Welcome back to Africa Science Focus, the science and development show from SciDevNet. I am Ogechi Ekeanyanwu. In this episode, we delve into the hurdles that women on the African continent experience while attempting to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM. The underrepresentation of women in these sectors can be attributed to a variety of factors. The burdens of unpaid labor and gender stereotypes, for example, may make it more challenging for women to progress in STEM careers. But women who work in STEM can have a significant impact on society if they are given the chance to flourish in these fields. Our reporter, Michael Kaloki, had the opportunity to speak with a group of outstanding African women scientists. These scientists shared their stories and described the challenges that women face in STEM fields. They also offered solutions to the problem of underrepresentation.
I am Amina Garib Fakim. I am a chemist by training, and I have served as the 6th president of the Republic of Mauritius. And prior to this, I was a university professor and also an entrepreneur.
Professor, what challenges do women on the continent pursuing careers in science and technology encounter? And what has been your personal experience?
First of all, the numbers on there. And let's say, for example, a woman operating in a university, and at the same time, she chooses to get married and have a family. When she rejoin again the institution, she will find that she is assessed on very outdated criteria. For example, the gap years when she has been on maternity leave is not taken on board. Not enough is done in terms of providing for the mother, so she finds herself battling the outdated criteria for promotion. And also the fact that the base is not very large in terms of numbers coming in. So when you look at the funnel, we are really looking at the funneling out. The trickle that comes out, they very often get blocked at middle management level. So there are not enough women in key positions. And also we find that societal attitude to women, not just in sciences, but in any field, being in engineering, being in higher position, societal attitude doesn't actually help the women to make her way up. And in my case, I battle these prejudices, because don't forget that women, they are not considered at par to the male colleague. So the problem is multifold. But promoting women in science requires also mentoring, requires also having these role models. And that is true not just for women in science, but for girls who aspire to go into the sciences. And for me, again, the problem was the fact that when I wanted to start a career in science, I was discouraged because I was told that science is for boys. It is not meant for girls, because when you come back, the advice I was given by the career guidance officer is that when I come back, there'll be no job for me. Because this is the premise, of course, of a male-only domain, which is completely false. And these are the kind of stereotypes we have to get rid of. And to get rid of this stereotype, we need to start including in books. We need to see more women faces in books. We need to do away with all these negative stereotypes. And also, one more important thing as well is we need to look at the infrastructure of accessing education, accessing sciences for girls and boys, but more for girls. So we need to make sure that the infrastructure is there, the role models are there, and the mentoring is there, and also the stereotypes are removed.
Professor, on the African continent, how involved are women in fields of science? And what have things been like in the past, and what is it like now?
When I was growing up, it was a challenge for parents to educate their girls. The culture would have it that educating a girl is not a priority because the girl will be married off, and it's the in-laws who will be benefiting. And it made economic sense to be educating the boy. So girls didn't have access to the sciences. And also we must posit this within the African kind of right for auto self-determination, because African history is about 60 odd years post-independence. So the issue was whether we are training African for being administrators, or we are training African as scientists. We were not training African to become scientists. We were essentially training African to be administrators. Therefore, the social sciences were very much in vogue. So a lot of emphasis was not put on building the infrastructure for schools, for colleges, universities, you name it, it wasn't there. And then if you add on to this, the issue of girls not having access to education, obviously the situation is more compounded. But having said this, it's a work in progress, and we are witnessing now more girls in education. And in fact, the UNESCO statistics speak very eloquently of how we are progressing. But still, in the sciences, there is a dearth in finding those women, because we know that women scientists are entrepreneurial, and women scientists, of course, are highly productive when they actually put the mind to solving some of the key issues, which, of course, are science-based and, of course, science-related.
Professor, what can be done to bridge the gender gap in the field of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, that is the science fields? What can be done to provide inclusive and supportive learning and work environments?
As I said, if you look at the figures themselves are very poor because of the scientist cohort in Africa. I think about 20% are women. So the numbers are very, very low. So we need to be more inclusive in our approach to recruitment. We need to actually, well, as I said, go back again to the school medium. Unfortunately, many African countries, they still haven't understood that they need to actually encourage boys and girls into the sciences. Now, also, what kind of science, what kind of pedagogy are we talking about in the continent? Rote learning is out. We need to make sure that the education which is being imparted to boys and girls, they are fit for purpose. Now, how to bring in more women is that we need to have this affirmative action. And we need to ensure that we encourage the girls. We don't say that what I was told, that science is not for me, science is for boys. So we need to actually bring in the role model. We need to encourage girls accessing education to begin with. And also, one more thing about Africa, our continent, we need to see that education being given to the child is also fit for purpose. It actually relates to the environment where she's growing up. So provide her with books, provide her with the infrastructure, make affirmative actions so that girls will be encouraged to go to the sciences. Parents also need to be spoken to, because very often parents have a key role to play in seeing to it that the girls access education, the girls remain in the sciences. And I think here the fathers have very, very important role to play. They can become that fantastic cheerleaders. And when that girl is going to college, I mean, very often when I was in the teaching profession, I found that the girls, they did very well. But where they actually disappear is that they tend to stay at middle management, because, again, society is not ready for that female scientist or that female professional. And when she actually makes it, if she actually becomes for example, university level, a deputy vice chancellor or a vice chancellor, I mean, you'll find that the entire society will be all out there to bring her down. So this is where we need to bring in that solidarity among women. So we need to actually keep encouraging, keep mentoring, and ensuring that this woman stays there and she's applauded for what she's doing. So we need to build in that positive narrative around the woman scientist who is out there making it and who can become that role model. And also at the level of the institution where she's working, I mean, we need to ensure that at the board level, there's a quota, so the law has to work with her. And also, we need to ensure that these promotion criteria I mentioned earlier on, they are really fit for purpose again, because they need to take on board the fact that the woman has to have a family, she'll be giving birth, she'll be away for a while. So they have to be factored in, not as negatives, but as positive, so that she can move on and up the ladder.
We also spoke with Angela Odwo Lungati, a technologist and the executive director of Ushahidi, a company that produces integrated technological solutions to empower communities in Kenya. Angela is a member of the Global Futures Council on Data Equity and the board of directors of the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, a non-profit organization which provides map data for disaster management and community development. She is also one of the co-founders of the non-profit organization Akira Chicks, whose mission is to inspire young women to get interested in technology. She talked to us about what is needed to improve chances for women working in STEM fields in Africa.
When I think about the opportunities or, things that can be done to improve opportunities in learning and work environments for women in STEM on the continent, I think it all begins with having a deep understanding of some of the issues that women face. And I'm going to give you an example from a project that we ran a few years back with Ushahidi called the Dreams Innovation Project. So the goal of the project was to try and reduce HIV prevalence amongst adolescent girls and young women by providing opportunities, providing bridges to employment, providing them with access to essential medicine, while also doing some elements of training and giving them some soft skills or even some technical skills. And there were some programs that recognized or realized that they had very high attrition rates, specifically with these young women. And so they used our platform to collect feedback to identify what the challenge could be. And I recall that one of the programs actually identified a challenge, especially for girls who were primarily, acting as home caregivers in their homes, So the girl would choose not to go to class because she didn't have anybody to take care of her child, or she didn't have anybody who could then take over some of the responsibilities in the home. And so one of the things that training program did was try and identify ways of providing childcare that would then enable these girls to come to school and still be able to get some of those opportunities to learn and to work, right? And so similarly, when I also think about it from a larger perspective, thinking about it from the family, government, or the private sector side, within the family, I think there's a lot that we could do to support girls by providing them the space to actually thrive. And the provision of space can be in the form of, encouragement. It could be in the form of making sure that some of those responsibilities are taken over by somebody else, right? From the government sector, I think this is where policy comes to play, right? What are some of the rules and regulations that have been set in place? I think one of the things that I'm really proud of about our country, about the Kenyan labor laws is things like the fact that it allows for, young mothers to go back to work and have their jobs protected, that you can take maternity leave, come back, and still have access to the same job. And I think in the private sector as well, it is thinking about things like how you create a conducive work environment that still enables young women and girls to be able to manage some of their, family commitments while still being able to have a career.
Angela, there has been a push in some countries, such as yours, that is Kenya, for technology to play a bigger role in the economy. What impact has the digital space had, if any, on women in STEM?
Kenya is one of those key examples of, where the, digital tools have really played a big role and had an impact on women in the science, technology, and mathematics, engineering and mathematics fields. I think, one, it has provided for the ability, financial inclusion. Look at things like M-Pesa and programs by groups like the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, right? It's provided women with the ability to actually engage at a deeper level. It's provided them with access to financing for their businesses. It's provided them with access to education. It's provided them with access to networks that can help to build them.
I should say M-Pesa that you mentioned there is a digital mobile money platform that is quite popular here in Kenya. Angela, what can Africa learn from other parts of the world about bridging the gender gap in STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics? And are there some regions that have done well in bridging the gap? And what did they do to get there?
This is actually an interesting question. And in many ways, sometimes I think there's also an opportunity for the rest of the world to learn from Africa. I personally do not subscribe to the idea that, those of us in Africa have to learn from other countries. There's room for collaboration and cross elemental cross sharing of ideas and lessons. And I say this just because I have seen in a lot of African countries, even here in Kenya, there are a lot of organizations that have come up and that have built training programs that are already doing work to encourage young women to take up careers in technology, in STEM. For example, the organization that I co-founded, Akira Chicks, it's been around for over a decade, right? And that's a model that ended up being applied in many other African countries. And I know that there are similar programs. So I'm not particularly sure that it's really a case of there's one region doing better than the other. If anything, this challenge around the gender gap in STEM is probably a global one that is shared. I believe recently the World Economic Forum shared a report about the continued, that it would take, I think over a century or more for us to be able to actually bridge the gender gap. So this is something that I think the world is still grappling with, and there's room for all of us to learn from each other. And it's also the recognition that some of the things that will work in one region may not necessarily work in another. And so it's also a call for all of us, even as we come up with solutions and programs, to think about the context-specific ways we can try to address these challenges. Of course, share some of those learnings and see how that can best help improve the situation.
If I could just ask you one more question, Angela, about Akira Chicks, which you mentioned there. It's a non-profit organization that aims to encourage girls to embrace technology. Could you just tell me a little bit about why you started it and what does it do?
Absolutely. And I'll say that with the caveat that I haven't been in active management of the organization since 2017. So the founders, Linda and Marie, who are the ones who are spearheading the amazing work moving forward, would actually be best placed. But speaking to why we started it in the first place, it was back in 2010, just when the tech ecosystem in Nairobi was budding and coming up at the iHub. And one of the challenges that we had faced in our own individual experiences, be it for me while I was still in university or for the other founders while they were in the tech workspace, was realizing that we were very few women in the room. And even at the iHub launch itself, we were very few women, right? It was a drop in the sea here and there. And so we wanted to try and figure out a way to create space for us to get to know one another, create a much bigger network, but then figure out how to also encourage other women to take up careers in technology and provide training.
And I should note just one thing, that Angela, when I was at a function one day, I met a group of young high school students and I asked them what they were doing there, and they told me they were there as part of Akira Chicks. So is it that the organization that you co-founded, Akira Chicks, aims to get women involved in STEM at a young age?
Absolutely. It is definitely that. So it's almost like looking at a tree. At least that's how I know that the current leadership also describes it, that you start from the ground up, that you start by planting a seed in the minds of young women so that from a very early age, they know that is something that they can take up as careers. And then you get into a bit more mentorship where they get to see other women working within the industry. And then you get into building their skill sets and actually get them to the point where they are leading in the technology space.
When it comes to pursuing professions in STEM, women encounter a variety of obstacles throughout the continent. Michael looked at the kinds of things that could be done to break down these barriers. Associate Professor of Analytical and Applied Environmental Chemistry at the Multimedia University in Nairobi, Anastasia Ngingi specializes in environmental chemistry research and teaching. She spoke to us about how opportunities for women in STEM could be improved.
What would you say about women in STEM and the role that can be played by, let's start with the family. Family is present in the formative years when a child is growing, and it's in that setup that a child can be supported. So girls in family setup, they need to be given the necessary support so that they can take up STEM subjects without fear. And because that is what is impeding, there is a lot of misconception that STEM is hard. The issue of stereotyping is still very rife within family setup, where some career opportunities are seen to be preserved for women and others for men. So if that is not inculcated into the girls' minds, so that stereotyping is not practiced from family setup, then they'll be encouraged to pursue all opportunities that are presented to them, STEM being one of them. They should also be exposed to role models. Young children tend to copy or to desire to be like somebody that they see thriving in a specific area. So if they are exposed at such an early age to role models, that is women in STEM, then they can take up that opportunity. Then now when we come to women in STEM in working or already having careers in STEM, we find that families also need to offer support to such women, knowing that at some point family activities, family responsibility may require them to drop off and probably nurture young ones. We should be able to offer women support in their careers so that they are able to take that break and come back and go back to their workplaces, having not lost from both ends, from work area as work environment as well as family environment. So that support is required all around. From the government perspective, the role that they can play is that they can have or put in place deliberate intervention and strategies that would promote STEM in women. That is from the education systems. We can also talk about advocacy, mentorship programs, funding, provide platforms for role models so that they can also offer the experiences to upcoming women in STEM. Having recognized that STEM is a key driver of economy, then it's very important to be deliberate, and women should also be given opportunities by the government to be part of that area as far as economy is concerned. So having talked about offering of scholarships and internships, those opportunities should be equal opportunities to both women and men, and even girls and boys at whatever level they present themselves.
Professor, thank you for that. What can Africa learn from other parts of the world about bridging the gender gap in STEM? And are there some regions that have done well in bridging the gap? And if so, what did they do to get there?
That is a good question and also observation about Africa being lagging behind a bit in this area of STEM, the women in STEM. Even now, if you look at most of the women in STEM, currently those 35 years and above, most of them got their education outside, their higher education outside the country. And me being one of them, we have experienced other societies whereby it is quite different from what we have in our setup in this country. Most of the developed countries, the Europe, the US, you find that there are more women in STEM than the situation in Africa. That can be attributed to early exposure, also deliberate programs by those countries to promote women in STEM. And Africa is just starting. So we have milestones to make. And some of the things that can be done, because as I've mentioned, is that higher education opportunities for women in STEM have been quite few in our country and most of African countries, simply because of lack of funding. If now we talk about higher education, funding is limited, and the scholarships that you get are outside the country, very few within the country. So if Africa wants to promote STEM in women, then there should be deliberate interventions at different levels. At higher levels, let's say in universities, then have programs that provide funding for women in their studies, bachelor's level, master's, PhD, etc. Then we can talk about more advocacy for women in STEM. That can also be deliberate. So whatever other countries have done, I would say is that they were deliberate. At some point, they became deliberate in interventions to make sure that women were more involved in STEM, and they have seen the results of those interventions. That is what Africa needs to do at different levels of education.
So what does the future hold for women in Africa who are interested in STEM fields? We're going to consult with Professor Gurib Fakim once more to find out whether or not there has been any advancement made by women in the scientific community on the continent.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there are many. It's work in progress. As I said, for the past 60 years, we have seen increasingly women who are coming on board. But still, it is still a trickle. And this is where I bemoan, because we need to get more. Why we need to get more is that when women participate in the sciences especially, and when women participate in many economic activities, the GDP point increases. This is something that we can speak to governments, because we need to get these women talent on board. We need to get these women scientists on board. We have seen during the COVID how women were there at the front, literally, to help solve the problem. Now, just think of these women who are trained in the science, the health sector. These women who are trained with the tools for agriculture, they can feed their families. And at the end of the day, when you look at the African continent, it is women who feed Africa. So let us empower her with the technology. Let us empower with the knowledge. But all these, of course, comes for the grassroots women to be educated, for her to have access to the proper education. The investment that the government will bring into the education sector is going to be critical for Africa's advancement. So it is work in progress. It may not be going fast enough, but we need to get there. We need to bring in those women on board so that the African economy can, of course, move from leap and bounds.
That's all from us at Africa Science Focus today. If you want to find out more, head to the SciDevNet website. That's www.scidev.net. Today's show was produced by Alice Hurst, with editing and presenting by Ogechi Ekeanyao. Reporting was done by Michael Kaloki. Until next time, goodbye. Africa Science Focus is produced by SciDevNet and distributed in association with your local radio station. This podcast was supported by the Science Granting Council's initiative, which aims to strengthen the institutional capacities of 16 public science funding agencies in Sub-Saharan Africa.